Hi guys. Hi. Do you know what bread is actually made out of? Have you ever thought it? Have you ever made bread? Let's see. You normally add some water and some flour, maybe some sugar and salt, and ooh, there's these little guys that come in a little packet, and this is called yeast. So this is the little magic that you have to add to dough to make it rise. Otherwise, if you don't add these guys, your bread's gonna be flat. And this is much yummier than some flat bread. Ugh, nobody likes to eat that, right? So, today we're going to talk about these little guys called yeast. Now, if you open this, it's going to look like just powder, okay? Not anything that fancy, but actually, these guys are microorganisms, but they're actually much bigger than bacteria. Now, if you picture bacteria as the size of a human, a person, then yeast will be the size of an elephant. This is how much bigger they are, yet they're super duper tiny. Now, I'm going to cut this so I can show you what they look like. Okay, so these are dried yeast, and we're going to have to wake them up in a little bit to get them going. Hop. This is what they look like. Just powder. Nothing fancy, but they can do some really magical things. Now, yeast, kind of like bacteria, you can find them pretty much anywhere. They're on our skin, they're in the air, they're in fruit and veggies. They're kind of like, they're from the family of fungi, or mushrooms, but of course they're much, much smaller. And we use them a lot to make yummy things. We can make bread, we can make kuzunak. This is the Easter bread we make here in Bulgaria. And also, mommies and daddies really appreciate yeast when they drink their wine and beer, because yeast are actually helping in this process too. Now, I have another question for you. Now, have a look at this slice of bread really carefully and tell me, do you notice something on it? How about this thing, or this thing, or that thing, or this thing? What is that? Is it completely smooth, or are there any holes in it? What do you think? Yep, there are lots of holes in bread on the other side too. And do you know why these holes are there? They actually used to be bubbles. Bubbles full of gas, kind of like air. And these bubbles were made by our little friends, the yeast. When you make the dough and you put them in, they start eating the sugar inside, and they start producing this gas. It's kind of like they're farting in a way, okay? But in a nice way. And this gas gets trapped in the dough and starts to make it rise and go up. And those bubbles, later on when you put your dough in the oven, they just pop and the gas goes away, and what we're left with are those holes in the bread. Also, now the bread has already risen and has become nice and big and fluffy and ready for eating. Now, do you guys want to see what these yeast would look like? Okay, under a microscope. I have a picture for you. Okay? What does that remind you of? Do they look kind of like one type of the bacteria we looked at before? Kind of similar, except these guys are much more sophisticated than the bacteria. Now, if you actually have a closer look, you see how they look like they're pairs. There's this one, and then this one and this one. Unlike the bacteria, which are just stuck together to party, these guys are actually making more of themselves right now. So this is kind of like the mama yeast, and this is the baby yeast. Mama yeast, baby yeast, mama yeast, baby yeast. So the little guys are just budding off, and that's why they call them budding yeast, because these little baby yeasts are budding off their mummies, and now they're their own yeast, and they can go on and make some bread. Well, and other stuff too. Now, do you guys want to make some out of Play-Doh? Do you remember how to make Play-Doh? It's really simple. Remember, you just have to mix flour, salt, and water, and a little bit of oil. And I'm going to use the same Play-Doh from before, because I already have it, and I'm going to make some lovely budding yeast. Now, here we go. Just remove the scissors, we don't need that. I'm going to make the mama yeast. Okay, has to be round. And then, oops, this is too big. I'm going to make the baby yeast. And here is our little budding yeast. But, of course, it's cuter when you put some eyes on it. And this time I have eyes. So, here we are. I actually found a lot of eyes in the meantime. So, oh, I'm going to put a green eye and a black eye. Alright, and I'm going to put it here. And I'm going to put it there. And voila! This is my budding yeast. One eye is really crazy. It's the green one. But this is what they would look like. So you can have lots of these. And if you mix them in with some water and some sugar, you're going to start eating the sugar and making some bubbles. Do you guys want to do this? This is a really cool experiment you can also do at home. All you need is hot water. Not super hot. You don't want to destroy them. Just warm water, some sugar, and some yeast. Ready? Let's get it ready and do the experiment. Alrighty guys, so now we're going to try and see how exactly yeast is able to help the bread rise. And this is by making bubbles. So, what we need for this experiment is some sort of a container, a bottle or a flask. I'm going to use a flask, but you guys can just use a bottle, okay? Then, you need a cup with water, and it has to be warm water. It has to be quite warm to the touch. You don't want boiling hot water because you will destroy the yeast. You also don't want cold water because it's not going to wake them up. You need the water to be warmer than your hand, okay? You need a stir stick, and you need, of course, a lot of sugar, your yeast, and a balloon. Okay, so let's start by adding the yeast. Remember, they look kind of like a powder, thicker, bigger powder. When you pour them in, you're going to have to stir really well so that all the yeast can go in. If you have a closer look, they'll look like little sticks actually, more than powder. And it smells kind of nice. So you gotta stir until they turn into a paste. It's gonna look like a brown paste. Kind of like buza if anybody's drinking this sort of thing. You have to make sure that all of them are part of the water now, and none of them are stuck to the sides or to the bottom of the cup. Okay, so you gotta give it a good stir. It's gonna take a few minutes maybe. Just make sure that all of them are nicely dissolved in. Okay, a little more. Some of them are getting stuck to the stick, so I have to get them off of the stick and make sure they're in. Now, the next step, now that you've actually dissolved them in, is to add the sugar. Now, what we've done so far is we've woken them up, we've activated them, and now we really need to give them their food, okay? They love to eat sugar. And when they eat sugar, well, they make a lot of gas. Kind of like when we eat a lot of food, we have to go to the toilet. Well, they need it too, okay? So, let's see, maybe a spoonful of sugar. Alright, and then we have to stir again. We want to make sure that the sugar is part of the water and the yeast now, and it's not going to just stay on the bottom. We want the sugar to dissolve. Stir, 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 stir. And once we are ready with this, we're going to carefully pour it in here, okay? Then we're going to place the balloon on top and watch what happens. Okay, I think it's ready now. Ready? You're gonna be careful not to spill because we're going to smell like uncooked bread. Let's just double check. Okay, just a little bit of sugar left. This is perfect. Now, this is our mix. Now, in order to check whether there's a lot of gas coming up, the best way is to actually find a way to trap it. Okay? So if we put the balloon on top, we're actually going to be able to see if any gas is made by the yeast. If any gas is made, guess what's going to happen? It's going to fill up the balloon, and the balloon is going to go plop, straight up. Okay. Now we're going to leave it down and we're going to watch it very carefully. It's going to take a little bit of time. Okay? So you have to leave it maybe for about 10 to 15 minutes without pushing it, okay? Just leave it still. The yeast is going to wake up and start chewing up the sugar and making all of its bubbles, all right? And what you have to do is you have to watch for the balloon, and also you have to watch what's happening right here, okay? Because if they're making bubbles, they might also make foam, and this foam might start to rise up, and it's going to be really, really, really cool. Now, while we're waiting for this, we're going to set up for another experiment. Do you guys know that you can use yeast to make a volcano? It's one of the best volcanoes because it produces the softest foam in the world, okay? So, while we're waiting for this, I'm going to tell you how to do the other one, okay? Hold on.